She may fade away in your hands. The birth of a new day. Minds that keep their secrets will fall behind the clouds. And there upon the rainbow is the answer to our never-ending story. Never-ending story.
Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities and Alternative College and High School here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast, well, we'll have our guest recite the title once we get it queued up here. And Lindsey Sharman, what is the title as we get oriented here?
I can't even do it. The Neverending Story 3. Literally, I couldn't do it. I could not watch this film.
So all good things come to an end, and this is the conclusion of our series, which Lindsey has very, very generously dropped in for and provided some great insights. And I encourage everyone to check out both the first installment and the second. In terms of the films, we kind of broke it up that way, but nominally, the first half of Michael Ende's story is taken care of in the first movie, and the second half much more loosely in the second film. So there's a certain pattern to it. And Lindsey, how much of the source material goes into this installment, number 3?
Literally none. There's not a single thing from the book that is in any way connected to this film at all. It is a complete divergence. And that's why it's so deeply disappointing. Again, the book is full of beautiful source material that second film barely scratched the surface of the second half. You could have made at least 6 films of the second half of the book, and they didn't even do one, really. And so this third movie is such a disappointment. It's so opposite everything that the Neverending Story is. It's like they were trying to do the 80s sitcom thing, the 90s sitcom thing as a movie, and all of the same themes we see in these really banal sitcoms are here in this movie, magnified. Is that supposed to be Falcor? I mean, that's not even Falcor. Come on.
that Falcor is in it. The Rock Baby is in it. Let's see what else. The with my sense of humor and things, if I were to name this, I would say, why does the childlike empress have boobs? That would be my question here. She looks about 27 in this.
The whole punk vibe, like the dirty punk vibe, and like the bad guys, the whatever they're called, the nasties, and like it's just.
We have a lot here to get into, but there's little apostolic succession to the original material. That's for certain.
Yeah.
You know who's missing in this? I think you noticed one of the actors was switched out.
Oh, the Carl Conrad Coriander, our bookseller, right? He was in the first 2. He was like the only character to make it from film 1 to film 2, and then he's not in the third one. And for some reason, the bookstore is now a library in the school. Just no explanation. It's just like, what?
You're in a hard spot when your ride or die actor, the one guy who made it into number 2, is not willing to carry on into number 3.
So bad.
Interestingly, that was an English, he was an English actor, but he was from India originally. When India, I think he was born right at the end of British occupation in India. So he was actually Indian by ethnicity.
Oh, fascinating.
The Coriander fella, but we don't have to worry about that because he's not in this film. All right. So some of my observations besides my wandering eye for the Empress, the 28-year-old Empress or whatever. I think here she is. There she is. But besides that, the Falcor, I would say, sad to say, Lindsey, Falcor along with the rock baby, seem to have turned into like fetal alcohol syndrome victim.
Just weird, like drug-induced visions of craziness. Like, why did we do this?
Now, some of this was budding out into the second one, but this, I think you had even said this, the comparison. How did you say it with Citizen Kane? So I don't flub it.
Oh yes, a friend of ours said, "Oh man, if you're gonna watch the third one, it makes the second one look like Citizen Kane." I was like, "That's insane," because the second one was so bad.
Yeah, perspective is something here. It really is. I mean, we thought we had reached the dregs last week, but no, I would say there's something to that funny observation. But
this
yeah,
movie is like the answer to the question, like, can it get worse? Yeah, it can.
Falcor is indeed just bumbling. As is, I mean, the rock monster baby really does seem like a fetal alcohol syndrome kid. It's all just gaga goo goo, and so you have this. You have, and it's a lot of it. It's slapstick like number 2, but a lot of it. And this is how you know a franchise is running out of gas. Is doing a lot of riffs off of pop culture. So, for instance, at one point, Falcor is flying through the sky, and he comes across a Lufthansa, I believe, is a German carrier, a German jet in the air, and he tries to talk to the jet, and he thinks it's Falcor. Or at the end, I think the third act, where it really gets chaotic for reasons we can lay out as we look at the plot. There's a certain chaos baked into the story itself besides our observations, but Falcor lands at like a Chinese New Year, so they have the dragons, and he's trying to hit on the Chinese dragon. How they get in the costume and they dress like the dragon.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. At a certain point, the tree guy, he hears like it's like Avatar or something. He hears like a logging company, gets freaked out over the logging company. Because what happens here is that some of the characters, like the rock baby and the tree, they come into our world. Oh my goodness! Wow, what a plot twist! What a plot twist! Now it's not just, but it doesn't make sense in the movie. Or it doesn't make sense in the world, we'll say.
Right. Because if you were to come into our world from Fantasia, it's the way the Nothing described, the way that the Gmork described, you'd go through the Nothing, you become a lie. So you wouldn't look anything like yourself in the other world. And they just skip over that part and they just jump into a totally new. It's so ridiculous.
And then we have the villains. And again, we're just introducing characters, but we'll get to the plot for the audience who's missing out. Obviously, their whole life has passed them by without the Neverending Story 3. But we're just laying out our dramatis personae. Here, by the way, do you recognize this actor?
I can't recognize that person, but is the other one Jack Black?
The other one is this fella here is Jack Black, an early role. Apparently did a whole string of kind of, this is way more than a cameo. I mean, he's a central figure here. But did you know Jack Black was in I Know What You Did Last Summer?
No.
Yeah, he did a whole bunch of these cameos in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's a whole other show how he ended up where he's at, but that's neither here nor there. The kid though, who's allegedly, this isn't canon, Lindsay. Are we agreed on this? This is not canon.
Not canon. No.
This is allegedly Bastian Bucks. Balthazar Bastian Bucks, BBB. But this actor is the kid who did about a year and a half before Free Willy.
Oh, yeah, he does look familiar. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's Free Willy.
Yeah. So anyhow, the villain. So Jack Black, and I do believe I have a photograph of his whole cortege here. These are the villains. So Lindsay, remind me, having loved and cherished the first story, who is the villain or the foil at the very least in the first story and movie?
Or the Nothing, right? I mean, the Gmork are like these are the bad guys. This is the force you're working against. This is the force of destruction, and now we just have a group of bullies. Punk, right? 80s, 90s bullies.
Yes. So the first villain, as we all know now, was the Nothing, and just in between, Lindsay, what was this is a real question. What was the villain looked like kind of an 80s boss bitch. Who was the villain in the second one?
Yeah, depending on how you pronounce her name, I always read her as Zaide. And Zaide, or I think they call her Zaide or something in the movie, but she's like a very minor semi-villain in the book. I shouldn't say very minor, but like somewhat minor. You know, there's a lot of sort of semi-villains along the way, as these little, you know, plot points of adversity and, you know, moving the plot forward. And then she's the main villain in the second one. And they also have this sort of shadow of the idea of the possibility that there's the emptiness.
The
Which
emptiness.
is just
That's
like
right.
another version of the nothing, but like
No.
worse. It doesn't make sense.
Well, these villains, they continue in the tradition of the nothing and the emptiness, and so so now it's completely personified. You move from the first film and the first part of the whole book, for the nothing, which is this very very sublime concept, very abstract concept, which a child apparently can get, and can understand. Then you move to a more conventional personified character in the Zaid character, the emptiness, and now you have. Do you know what the gang's called?
The
The
nasties.
nasty, right?
Just so stupid.
And so it's completely personified. There's no abstraction whatsoever. It's just this is just total movie theater slop for a Saturday. That this is all this was ever meant to be. And it's worth bringing up. Have we met any other characters that are new here? There's a sister, and there's some other things I can bring up when we do the plot. But you know who's missing, Lindsey?
Who?
Atreyu.
Oh, he's never even this one.
They didn't even make a try at Atreyu, which is, I guess, let the dead stay dead. But
He's blessed for it. He didn't have to participate in this nonsense.
now, I'm wondering here, the second Neverending Story, I do believe that was an American production as well.
It sounded like it, and it sounded like this third one was didn't even have a US distributor, so I wasn't sure
The
who
director
was behind it.
was a British fellow, Peter MacDonald, here, and he appears to, just looking at his filmography, which we're going to take a quick look at, to be that sort of film, the strata of the film industry that kind of cleans up after actual art and actual movie making and so forth comes in, but still has enough hope to, you know, to turn a buck, certainly, and to you know, have a certain ounce of creativity. So are you able to read some of these films? I'll read one. So we have the Neverending Story 3, and then right next to him,
Rambo 3.
Rambo 3. Right?
He's good at these sequels, apparently.
Sorry?
I said he's good at these sequels, apparently.
Exactly. So Rambo 3, you know, just action movie slop, missing all of the nuance of the book or the movie First Blood.
100%.
Legionnaire, I've seen Legionnaire. Again, just a Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, it's a muscle film. There's no real storytelling here, and it's a good thing to take your girlfriend out or your boyfriend out on the weekend when we still went to movie theaters. But what else do we have here? Well,
I see another Rambo. I see Super Dave. I see one of the Indiana Jones. I can't tell which.
Well, we'll have to look a little bit closer, Lindsey. Let's see if my cursor can. Okay, can you read that?
No.
Okay, this is exactly what I'm saying, and this is what the Neverending Story 3 is. This is Indiana Jones, The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, and the Train of Doom.
Okay, so these are just random spin-off sequels. Like he's just like you said, he kind of catches the slot.
Right. Oh, wow. Indiana Jones? No, not quite. That's Young Indiana and the Phantom Train of Doom, which might be a repeat on this website. What else? There were a few other. Oh, I was kind of taken aback that he did Hamburger Hill, which is but even Hamburger Hill in 1987 is a second tier Vietnam War movie, trying to vacuum up the success of Platoon or Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they're just like, what's been working? What's the formula? Let's plug it in. Okay, here's another film.
Look, he
You know,
directed
because the
the.
Neverending
Uh-huh.
Story 1 and 2 were pretty successful from what I can tell. 1 was wildly successful and 2 was like decent. Like they were like,
Mhm.
okay, that made a good amount of money. Let's try it again. Which is
Yeah.
these are like the books that you find in the grocery stores, right? Like they're just literally formulaic. Like they're like, here's the heroine, here's the whatever, here's the
Oh,
romance element, and this is you have to have this and this plot point. Here's the like animal character that has to come in at some point. Like, you know, it all just fits some thing that they've determined people like. Right? It's all
we're gonna
numbers.
date ourselves here, Lindsay. Chicken soup for the football player soul, chicken soup for the
Yes.
cheerleader soul, chicken soup for the Christian soul, chicken soup for the auto mechanic soul. Right? Remember those? Remember those
Yeah.
books?
Yeah. Well, and at least like the, you know, For Idiots series had like a purpose, right? Like it was simplifying things that you actually might need to know. And so like
Mhm.
here's like a right, but a lot of this is just and you know, whatever. I understand it's really fun to read fluff sometimes, especially if you're like us and you're reading a lot of heady stuff and you're always kind of digging into it. And every once in a while you just want to like not think and just read something that's just fun, right? And
Mhm.
like same with
Understand.
movies. Sometimes, like you said, you just want to go and like eat some popcorn and watch something. And I get it, but I don't even think this fits that category. It's a horrible movie. It's not even fun to watch.
Just before we get back to the Neverending Story, just for fun here, Mr. McDonald also did The Empire Strikes Back, which again a sequel of a
Interesting.
sequel, but one that at least I believe I'm not a Star Wars fanatic, but I believe it's held its own compared to some of the later monstrosities. And then
Yes. Well, and
the
it actually
Exorcist.
like belonged. Like you needed it and it was in the progression as
Mm.
part of the story, it's part of the canon. So it didn't just kind of like come out of nowhere. Right.
But if you look at that, like Empire Strikes Back 1980 or Exorcist 2, again, he loves the sequels. That's 1977. He's still putting out decent stuff, but by the time he gets to the 90s, he's figured out his jive, and it's not quite as given to attention, let's say.
I've never heard his name, so film buffs I know don't necessarily think about him. No offense, Peter McDonald.
I don't think he's after film buffs. I don't think he cares about them. I think he cares about financiers and
Right.
and that end. He's not so given to the filmmaking. All right. I know you didn't watch this, Lindsay. Would I be allowed to give just a brief plot to this plot outline for the audience?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So there's not much to work with here. This is, as Lindsay has indicated, very cookie cutter. If we look at the first film and to a second extent, living off of the gas of the first, the two installments, there were unique things partially why that film is so beloved and why it carried on as it did. In the Neverending Story 3, we begin, and there's various titles, and this can explain some of the confusion of the film. For instance, if you look really, really close, you may not even be able to see it with the Chiron, but at the bottom of this film poster, it says "Escape from Fantasia." Some of the film posters say "Return to Fantasia." And even there, you see a certain confusion in the subtitle that both of these were put out. And some of the film posters that I've seen also have things like, a new telling of a never-ending story. So this is the gobbledygook of this installment, is that it is both carrying over the mythos and the characters of the first two films in the book in a certain way. But at the same time, it wants to be a completely new thing, as evidenced by certain of the film posters. And so just in terms of the chaos of this production, I bring those things to bear. But as concerns this, what we have is, we're plopped into this is also the confusion, is that Balthazar Bucks, he now is he is the same character, but this is supposed to be a reboot as well. So just playing off the first one, his father, who was widowed, has now remarried a divorcee. The divorcee wife has a child. So late 80s, early 90s, right? You have even into the 90s proper. You have the so-called broken home and the different half siblings and things. So that's a B plot in here, is now Sebastian has to get along with his difficult teenage sister, and there's for much of the film until the end, disagreement amongst them. Okay, so you have this merged family. They call these blended families nowadays. There we go. And Bastian is now in a new school. He's now, I guess, by his age, beginning high school. We'll put him at about 14 or 13 or 14 or whatever. And he comes across the nasties, who are the very lame. Just looking here. So here, once again, we have Escape from Fantasia. Some of the posters say Return to Fantasia. In any case, he bumps up against the Jack Black character and the nasties, who are the villains here, very on the nose sorts of villains. And very much, help me out here, Lindsey. In the first film, how is it that Bastian ends up in the bookshop? Is he running from bullies?
He is running from bullies, and they're not like a specific crew. They're not specifically named. It's just sort of general people who are chasing kids who are like, oh, look at, there's the guy we pick on, right? Run, let's get him. In the book, you barely even, he's bullied, but he doesn't go into it. It's not like this deep thing. And so to even have a group of bullies with a name that you specifically interact with is very different.
So they're just recycling this. And so he ends up in the library of this school. And I encourage the audience, there are many frustrated analyses of this film where people have the clips from the movie behind them and so forth. And Lindsey and I are going to take things in directions more literary in time, and also meditate on some of the earlier themes here. But you do see in the third installment here, as he runs into the library, again, this it's not even slapstick. Like the bully, there's a double metal door, and Bastian runs in one of the metal doors, and the bullies, as we know, in like a cafeteria, one of those doors is going to be locked for a lot of the time, and one's going to be open, and the bully's just pounding on the one locked door. But they could just walk around. You're right. They could just walk around the open door, but they're pounding on it to intimidate Bastian as he seeks refuge in this library. And he comes across the stand-in, we'll say, for Mr. Coriander, who is apparently, I guess, sold the bookshop and become a school librarian. And it's all very formulaic. Bastian picks up the Neverending Story book, which is, oh my goodness, Lindsey, development. Now it's a reference book, so you can't take it out of the library anymore. It's a reference book, and it has completely different artwork on the cover, incidentally. And okay, long story short, Bastian starts reading the book. The bullies come into the library, and he seeks refuge further in the back room. And I did work in a school library at one point in my life, and there is, kind of a back room that people just throw all sorts of junk in. And this is where Bastian is, and you all know what's coming. He reads the book. Of course, it's the 1990s, so there has to be a hard, how do you say, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, to indicate that he's going into Fantasia and into the never-ending story. Okay, we can do the scene by scene. I leave it to the audience to dig that up. But what's important here is to see where the creators try to be, creative. So Bastian is now in the book. This is also something that's different than the earlier installments, because now it's like, oh my goodness, another franchise that was done to death, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So now Bastian is sucked body and soul into the book. He's not a kid in an attic somewhere and his imagination is taking over. He is now body and soul taken into the book. Okay, eventually the bullies come into the library, I believe after Mr. Coriander is knocked off for happy hour. And they have discovered the book and apparently almost immediately cracked the code of the type of magic in the book. There's no mystery in this. It's everyone knows their cues. They know their steps. And Lindsey, it's so bad. And this explains how some of the characters we formerly have come to know and love end up in the real world, right? This is also a creative twist. The nasties figure out that if you particularly Jack Black, who isn't, he isn't this dumb musclehead. I mean, he's cracked the code of this this magical book. So there's kind of a breakdown there in the character portrayal. But anyway, he figures out how this whole thing works, and so he realizes, oh my goodness, Lindsey, if you shake the book, what are you also shaking?
Fantasia.
Mm-hmm. And so, there's an earthquake in Fantasia every time that Jack Black shakes the book. And they trash the library, and then the B plot begins to take over. And the sister, long story short, has gotten her hands on the Aron, which looks completely different. It looks like a Pepe the Frog meme nowadays. It looks nothing like the snakes eating eating the tails and all this stuff. And again, a lame reuse and rehash of a theme that actually does appear in the second part of the book, where and Lindsey, maybe you can shine a little bit of exposition on this. Remember in the book where Bastian in Fantasia kind of gets too big for his britches because of his success? Can you just briefly recap that for us?
Oh, there's so much of it. I don't know which part, but yeah.
Don't be brief. Go on. Just how he gets arrogant, in a synopsis.
Yeah. Well, he definitely, I mean, right from the start, actually, he's like, I want people to notice me. I want to be brave. I want people to know my stories. He gets his library that's named after him in the Silver City, and he's got his special sword that only he can use. And, he's changing this and that and making the world better. And then he has, encounters Zaide, and she's like coaxing this. She's like, oh yeah, you are so amazing, and everyone should bow to you, and you should have this power. Why else would you have the Orin? This is, and people are jealous of you also, by the way. And they want to take it from you, including Atreyu. And look there he is trying to take it from you, and all of this until he and then he's also, part of his arrogance is like, well, I want to see the childlike empress again. And they're like, well, no one can see her more than once. You've already seen her, you're not going to see her again. And he's like, no, I'm going to, because I can do anything because I have the Orin. So his hubris just grows, his arrogance just grows until he creates disaster with it, which, again, major spoiler alert, but he actually stabs Atreyu. I know in the movie, he just kind of throws him down a subtle hill, and that's like catastrophic for some reason. But in the book, he actually like stabs him through with a sword, and he, you ostensibly you think he may even be dead, which again, apparently in the book or the second movie, you're supposed to think he's dead from rolling down the hill as well. I'm not sure why, but so anyway, it's horrible though, right? When you're reading this in the book, you're like, that's your best friend, is the only person who even gets you or knows you in this whole world. These other beings think you're God, or they think you're a general, or they think you're amazing, and they're like following you, but they don't know you. And here's your best friend, and you stab him through. And so this is sort of like one of the climaxes of his hubris, right, where he then sees like the destruction, and now he's brought all of this chaos also to the ivory tower, and it's like war torn. And so you just see like the level of destructiveness that arrogance and hubris brings. And this is where he then starts to sort of go on his journey of into self-hatred, right, and losing himself even more, and wondering what the point is and what he's supposed to do now. So yeah, one of the main themes.
Great. So you have this deep topic and this aspect of human life, which so much of the original material looks at. In this installment, number 3, you have that with the sister. She gets her hands in this world on the Orin and uses it to mess with her teachers and to do silly manipulative things. And then also, of course, it's the 1990s. 1994, this film comes out. It's within spitting distance of Clueless. Of course, the sister goes on a shopping spree with a Blossom hat. People would know the hat if you saw it from the sitcom Blossom. There's a lot of that. Even before we began recording, Lindsey had mentioned that this film, even the few minutes that she could stand, looked like a made-for-TV film. And a lot of the humor is from a sitcom. I would agree with that. And a lot of the filming, looks like the made-for-TV stuff, and part of that has to do, I believe, with the the stuff that was on, like Blossom already mentioned, with the hats and so forth. So the sister goes on a power trip and just goes on a shopping spree with the art. I mean, it's a far cry from some of these meditations on hubris and arrogance that we had early in the series. And in this, I'll introduce maybe a larger theme that we can develop a little bit later. I'm reminded, so we have 1, 2, and 3, Neverending Story 1, 2, and 3. I'm reminded of the old observation of the Latin language of the age of gold, the age of silver, the age of bronze. And I'd like to return to that idea a little bit later. But just to conclude with the summary here, after, in the second act, halfway through, that's when you start seeing the B plots really pick up. So Jack Black has shaken the book, and now the characters are all jumbled about, except for Atreyu, who doesn't exist in this. And then you start seeing the rock monster. And one of the things I noticed, besides reference to what I think is pretty obvious reference to Blossom and Clueless in this film, is also the licensing of the film of the song "Born to Be Wild," which are used by the rock monster, the retarded child, the fetal alcohol syndrome child of the rock monsters, takes his tricycle, his rock tricycle, and they're playing an adaptation of "Born to Be Wild." And there's a few other pop songs of the era that are licensed, which shows me that the director, again, was of this vacuuming level of Hollywood or the film world in general, and whatever that is in Britain, where he knew what played to audiences visually or acoustically, and he wanted to just make that work again. And so you have these pop hits. I think there's something that's during the fashion scene where the stepsister, has the R and is just buying stuff at the mall. Remember those? There's like a Cyndi Lauper adaptation. Whether it's Girls Want to Have Fun or some, there's some something very Cyndi Lauper-y in that the song that's used, and so that too shows me just the outside effects of commerce, which sets up for maybe a more meta theme that we're beginning to palpitate in the second movie. But I don't want to go too far ahead. What are some of your thoughts, Lindsey, if you had any there? All of it, just to put a bow on it. Hold that thought, Lindsey. Sorry. All of it, just to conclude with the plot. All of it comes together in this mishmash during a Chinese New Year type of thing, where all the characters in the Neverending Story and the real world collide, and then everything comes to a denouement at the very end. So the nasties become geeks and become total book nerds. And Bastian reconciles with his sister. The marriage of the widowed father and the divorcee mother, which had been on the rocks for much of the film, that reconciles. So everything ends up happily, Lindsey, like a good Disney film.
Oh God,
like a good American film.
I feel very sucked back into that time period of those sitcoms where everything was, broken families glued back together. Everything was these mixed families. Everything was like stepmoms and stepdads and stepsisters and like trying to learn to live with each other. And, oh, you're not my real dad. And, oh, you're not my real mom. And, oh, you're not my real sister. And like all of this stuff. And it's like, but why didn't you then just make a movie called something completely different? And you could replace this book with any title you want and just say magic book. This is the magic book. Look, I found the magic book. And you could replace the orange. It's just like, look, I found the gem or whatever. And like, just make it anything. But why bastardize this beautiful? It's so wildly, literally opposite the book. The book is such a profoundly deep exploration of psyche and consciousness and living in this material world and what is the spiritual world, what is the higher self, and all of these levels of like really profound thought. And then here on the very opposite side, we have like the most bastardized, commercialized, dumbed down, sitcom heavy, like just nothing. Why would you even do it? I mean, I get that like that the name potentially brings you like a few viewers, but the hatred of those viewers is going to outweigh their joy. So just like call it something else. Start fresh, dude.
Like besides, I mentioned the reference to Lufthansa, which is a German carrier, or Blossom, or arguably Clueless, and some other inputs. One of the others was there's a time where this bastard Falcor goes over the moon, and it's obviously a ripoff of E.T. It's obviously a nod of E.T. And Lindsey, and for the audience as well, just for fun, as of this recording, one of my recent guilty pleasures on the internet is watching people go on train trips, and they just do reviews of it.
I am also doing this. This is my favorite person is Solo, and he just goes on train ride, and there's no speech. It's all just text at the bottom where he's describing what's happening, and it's so meditative, and I love it.
It's very calming. There's so many of them, and I come across some that have been going on the Amtrak, the American Amtrak one.
Yeah,
and some of these ones will go on other ones. I mean, this is the YouTube creator phenomena. I guess someone's making money off of this stuff.
Well, you have to notice too when you're watching people from around the world. You're like, this is really neat, and then they go on Amtrak, and you're like, man, our trains are horrible. They're like third world status.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I wanted to make a point, like parallel. So I saw a couple who went on the Amtrak it's called, and it's like and this is like the Amtrak Top Shelf, and it's called it's from San Francisco to Chicago, and then you can take a connector to New York City. And of course, the name is slipping my mind right now. But in any case, this is their like top shelf Amtrak thing. And by all accounts, it looks very comfortable and great to make a film on and to spend a couple of days. But this same couple has another video, Lindsey, of the Orient Express in Europe. And apparently there are various trains that can claim the title Orient Express, including one from Istanbul now, which to Paris. But I saw one anyway from Italy to Paris, and this is still the Orient Express. And it's very beautiful and plush, and the food is good. And long story short, I had this realization, and this is appropriate to our meditation on the Neverending Story 3 and what came before. Knowing the margins that, knowing something of the margins that big companies run, a train car is only going to cost you so much. And if it's, $20,000 for a train car in either direction, that's not that much. And, you have to understand these companies are working with bigger margins than you or I are working at. At the end of the day, we're talking about Falcor, and I'm making a point here. The Amtrak, Stalinist Amtrak, bare bones, car that people spend, $1,000 to go on the top shelf Amtrak train is not really that in terms of what actually costs money than the Orient Express. If you actually look what you're getting from the Orient Express for one day, apparently is $10,000.
Wow.
To go for just a 24-hour trip is $10,000, and it's way more blue and plushy, and people call you sir and madam, and the Amtrak people, they're not quite so hoi polloi. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at the books, you're not actually looking at an expenditure that's very different between the two. You follow?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. This film, back to our theme here, this film, The Neverending Story 3, had enough money to license Born to Be Wild, which every Tom, Dick, and Harry show, I remember Alvin and the Chipmunks had a version of the cartoon. Alvin and the Chipmunks had a version of Born to Be Wild. Okay, everyone was licensing that. There was John Ritter films that are escaping my memory right now. They licensed the film. Everything in the 90s was licensing Born to Be Wild, including this movie. Why, Lindsey, did you have money for this, and you had money to do all of these type of cameos? I don't think Lufthansa, or for that matter, Steven Spielberg, was going to allow their imagery in the film without getting a kickback. How did you have money, Mr. McDonald, the director, to do that, and you didn't have money to get the Falcor puppet?
The same Germany. Puppet that already existed.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the build. That's the big buildup. How did you not have the money for this with the Falcor puppet? Go on.
For real. Look at him too. He just, what's interesting to me is I had criticisms of the Falcor in the film. And of course, I have a love in my heart for the Falcor in the film in the first two, because he, when I was a child and I saw him, I was like, this is the coolest thing that's ever existed, obviously. And I want to be on Falcor. And everyone had that feeling, I think, when they saw Falcor. He looks like a dog, kind of, and you love dogs, and so it's very welcoming and cute,
Mm,
and
yes.
and then you read the book and you realize Falkor in the book is like a wispy air dragon. Like he's
Mm.
very much not a dog type creature. And they sort of hit on it when you look at his body. There's some scales and stuff, and they're iridescent, and it's, they've got elements of it, but his face is very different and his paws are very different than they would have been in the book. And so, you can see these differences here. But even then, look at him. He's adorable. Like you love that Falkor. And then you go to this third movie and you're like, well, what is that? Why is this face so long? And why does he look weirdly menacing almost? And like, why did you have to change him so much? And he does actually, in a way, he looks like he might kill you. He's like the crack version.
He looks drunk. He looks intoxicated. That's what he looks like. He looks stoned.
For real. But also in a way that's a little closer to the book, actually. This is like the one thing in this film that might actually be somewhat close to the book. It's interesting.
I mean,
so you can see here, yeah, his body in the film is, in the first films, is very kind of sinewy, which is how it would be in the book. In the book, he's just like a long snake-like elemental being that, floats in the sky, essentially. Yeah.
What strikes me about this puppet is that someone spent a lot of time on the nose. The nose looks like a real human-ish or animal-ish nose, where one nostril is, slightly different than the other.
Yeah.
And then this thing, what the hell is this? Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, and those ears, like why? Why does he just have kind of hair now? I don't know.
All right. So let me try this here. Before we get to this, there were two things, Lindsey, I wanted to look at. Is there anything in particular you wanted to bring up beyond what we've laid out thus far about the Neverending Story 3?
I'm good. Nope.
So we're going to try this here for the audience and give you some behind the scenes with the internet. If this really flops, I'll just chop all of this out. This is the magic of editing. Okay, so for people who come across paywalls, which the Variety magazine is asking us to fork over, what you want to do is go to a website called Text, T-I-S-E, Textize, I believe, text only. And if this falls through, we're going to go to printfriendly.com. And this will remove the paywall and allow us to get to what we need to. There we go. But if this works out nicely, then I'll leave this in because it's a nice little hack. You don't have to worry about these paywalls. So this is Textize, a very simple website, and the most simple websites are often the best.
It's true.
All right. As a plan B, I do recommend Print Friendly. It has a different purpose, allowing you to print things without all the silly ads and things on the side, but this has seemed to behave itself. So this is from Variety, and Variety is a very, very big American magazine. I would put Variety in the same category as The Atlantic. It's really one of the ruling class publications here, but hey, people have fun, and even the New York Times has fun once in a while. I know what they're used for in this society, but all right. So this is a review from 1994 of The Neverending Story. And let me blow this up, Lindsey, and we're just going to read through this and see how the spirit and the muse moves us. Would you read this opening summary, please?
The Neverending Story lives up to its title in the worst way possible with this third outing, a charmless, desperate reworking of the franchise that might just as well be subtitled Bastian Goes to High School. Clearly aimed at a generation of moppets with one finger on the fast-forward button, this lame effort throws over the magical charm of the 1984 original and darker fantasy of the 1990 sequel for a semi-hip yarn patched together by a marketing committee. What a great description. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. Okay, this pick, I think they're referring, the filmmakers pick, I think they're referring to the production company, which has no U.S. distributor, has taken a middling $5 million, has taken in a middling $5 million in Germany since its late October release. This, again, is an article from 1994. And it looked to set and to garner reasonable business on ancillary income worldwide. That would be licensing of the film itself for television or VHS, for instance. Theatrically, however, this every which way mishmash looks unlikely to scale the major peaks of its two predecessors, which have grossed at a combined $150 million plus worldwide to date. Go on.
Central character Bastian, Jason James Richter from Free Willy, is now on the edge of puberty and moved home with his father. Dad's new wife, Jane, Tracy Ellis, is an eager-to-please happy homemaker with a sharp-tongued pubescent daughter, Nicole, Melody Kay, who reckons her fresh-faced stepbrother is just weird.
At school, Bastian is bullied by a bunch of senior punks called the Nasties. Bastian takes refuge in the school library, coincidentally run by Mr. Coriander. Freddie Jones taking over Thomas Hill's role in the first two picks. I said earlier in this recording that Thomas Hill was from India. It was very common in the 20th century for, we'll say, minority actors to take very Anglo names. For instance, you know Emilio Estevich?
Yeah.
Right, and he was in the Mighty Ducks, another great 1990s. He refused to do what his brothers did. You know who his brothers are?
I've heard this before, but I can't remember.
One of whom is Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
Right, Martin Sheen is about as English Anglo waspy a name as you get, right? I mean, he's a Spanish dude, just like his brother is. But and that was a thing, and maybe they had to roll with the punches, and that was the time. But Thomas Hill, I'm telling you, was from India.
Interesting.
Anyway, the new actor is Freddie Jones, and this fella takes on the antiquarian bookseller's role. And the bookseller is first introduced to the kid to the wonders of the Neverending story tome, which automatically writes the dreams of whoever is reading it.
Which isn't really what it does, but sure, we'll go with that. Turning its pages, Bastian wishes himself back into the dream world of Fantasia, courtesy of Jim Henson's Creature Shop. But when the Nasties get a hold of the tome and start filling it with their own warped imagination, Fantasia starts to crumble. Bastian locates Fantasia's child empress, now blossomed into the shapely Julie Cox.
To my observation earlier on.
Right. Who begs him to get the book back from the bad guys.
So this is Jim Henson. Look at this. Hold on. This is Jim Henson? This is the best Jim Henson could do?
He was probably like, man, I'm not doing my best for you guys. This thing is a piece of garbage. Here's some fetal alcohol syndrome retards for you.
How funny. Okay, let me get this back here. It's always the last tab you're after, too, when these things go awry.
For real.
Oh my goodness, right next to it. Okay. First, Bastian has to track down a variety of Fantasians who accidentally beamed back, Scotty, to the real world with him and are wandering around the U.S. in total confusion. So notice this too. Well, hold on. I do believe this. Correct me, Lindsey. In the first film, even though the book is obviously German, historically from Germany and presumably takes place in Germany, I do believe the book or the film Neverending Story 1 is supposed to take place in some generic American town on the East Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me like it's like on the East Coast too, but supposedly it's actually in Seattle, Washington, which
is surprising. Okay, interesting. Okay, so the U.S. stuff stays consistent in the films. Excuse me.
Right. Yeah.
All right, go on. The magic.
The magic of the original pick is in its gossamer light creation of a dream world entirely constructed from the imagination of a lonely, motherless kid living in Washington State. Though considerably darker in tone and kitted out with a Star Wars type score, the sequel maintained the fiction while directly involving the growing kid in the adventures. Loosely, right?
That's interesting. So the director here directed the third Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. Why? I don't know the answer. This would be interesting. Why did he not go to Industrial Lights and Art? Why did he go to Jim Henson for the puppetry?
Yeah, interesting. I don't know.
I mean, I'm just riffing here, but he had presumably contacts with whoever did the score, John Williams or whomever, of Star Wars 3. I wonder the backroom baseball of the Muppet stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, this latest installment tries to have it always thoroughly Americanizing. Yes, Americanizing the modern setting, not just visually, but also in terms of the sentiments. It's much more. It's a much more materialistic
Mm-hmm.
interpretation, to the point about the sister, for instance. Stirring in a heap of hip high school dialogue and relegating Fantasia sequences to little more than a collection of cuddly toys. I think someone said like 5 or 10 minutes of the film actually is Fantasia.
Oh God. Originality is in short supply. The Fantasian walking tree bark troll is an arboreal version of Oz's Tin Man, and the rock chewers, whose appeal fades fast, behave like lapidary clones of Fred and Wilma Flintstone.
There's, by the way, there are some, and you'll appreciate this, Lindsay, having been a teacher in classrooms. There's a lot of good adjectives here. Look at this: lapidary.
Yes,
Uh,
it's a well-written article, and it's also spot on its critique. So,
I mean, lapidary. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, gossamer. When was the last
can
time
you
you?
imagine?
Mhm.
Right, this is the type of writing we don't have anymore in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a general mag like this, like you would just get the. I mean, now it's all written by AI. So,
But there's that. You're right. But even the ruling class of who's reading Variety? It's the ruling class in my phrasing.
for those
Um,
who want to be them.
Yeah, exactly. But even and you even in reference in echoes nowadays, you still see this in the New York Times, and I have no use for the New York Times. How they're used in this society, but they still have enough professional integrity to use big words and to
Yeah,
use big ideas.
they've
And
actually still got a good vocabulary, which most people don't. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, well, it's interesting to me that they talk about like now writing, or it has been for some time, in the the vast majority of publications is written to, like they say, like a third or fourth grade level.
hmm hmm
Which who knows now what that even means, because things have fallen even farther.
wow, yeah,
But
hmm
I feel like that's this movie actually. Like the third installment is sort of like made for like the stupidest people, like the
mm,
people with like the least, thought or critique or any sort of depth about them. That's at least who it's appealing to, right? With that whole like sitcom-y, like mass production vibe. So it's interesting.
yeah. We'll get back to this here, but this is interesting too. I'm about half, we'll say 40% through Winston Churchill's Memoirs of the Second World War, and like the New York Times, I don't have much to say for Mr. Churchill, but like the New York Times, he also uses big words and
Mhm.
knows what he's doing, and he and the New York Times and the Variety here, in shades of difference, are echoes of a ruling class that used to have this idea of noblesse oblige, and that
Yes.
the ruling class at least should be contributing something, if only well written books and
And
ideas.
should at least have for themselves a higher standard than the plebs, right?
Yeah. And look at, I was struck with this, and I did not know we would go in this direction today. But look at the so-called archons of this society, Mr. Musk or Mr. Thiel,
Yep.
or there's some other guy called Sergey. They all dress like slobs, and they
Yeah.
they speak like slobs, and they speak like homeboys. And
Yeah.
there's no even attempt to dress up or to be formal, or all of that's lost. They all just drive. They drive amazing cars, but they pretend they
Yeah.
drive beaters and things. They
Yeah.
dress
Well,
like boys.
they are there. They have that Arrested Development, which maybe is by design, as it's definitely what they would like for the rest of us to emulate. Is that like glorifying the Arrested Development, which I actually wonder is what if that's what I was totally switching gears now to Aleister Crowley meant by the crowned and conquering child, right? Not
Oh,
that it would be individual, but that it would be this, meta sort of state of consciousness, deeply reduced and glamorized, right? Put it on a pedestal that it's cool to be a kid forever, a kid up until your 40s, 50s, 60s. And, what does Elon Musk glorify, beyond anything else? Video gaming.
mm, mhm.
Right, like you said, and I play video games. I get it. I'm not opposed. I recognize the Arrested Development in myself. But what if you're promoting this and dressing like a slob and doing it? It's like people are just going to adopt it even further. And well, we might have our criticisms of Jordan Peterson in various ways. At least he had like this mass appeal that promoted growing up,
Mhm.
taking responsibility for yourself, right? And taking care of yourself and having standards for yourself. And they hated that. So like
Mhm.
down with that, up with Musk, right?
Yeah, it's something I hope the audience takes away, that meditation, and that each will develop it a bit more on their own time there, because yeah, there's an agenda here with this whole thread. But we'll read a few more pieces here, Lindsay, and then we can. I know you have a busy day here, so we'll bring the bird down with some concluding thoughts, and we can always do follow-ups on this. There's endless artistic follow-ups. But on the performance side, the 14-year-old Richter is okay in a largely reactive role. Ellis is mostly restricted to double takes as his mom, and Jack Black, making maybe not a true entrance, but an early entrance, is good as a high school heavy, a tough, a big shot, a rough guy out of a 1980s John Hughes pick. Stealing most of the best lines as a snooty mall princess is Kay, also 14.
Other tech credits are up to scratch, though Peter Wolf's music fails to impart any consistent atmosphere.
See, I would be interested after we drop off recording to see Wolf if he had any connection to John Williams and that whole world of cinematography, music, like Star Wars and so forth. So I'm going to make a
Yeah.
note of that. All right. So my final, substantive point, and we'll bring the bird down with plugs and things like that, Lindsay. But okay. So we have a book dealing with childhood, and childhood is all sorts of folk songs we've looked at before, like Puff the Magic Dragon, for instance, in our first episode. In one way, it's something that can't truly be replicated. It's proper to its time period, and so we have that, and we have the Neverending Story films, and I'm interested in this, and I've had a few historical classes this week, and so my mind is in a certain direction. So let me know if I'm confusing here, but I'll try to make a single thesis of this and hear your thoughts. But you have the Neverending Story, and you have Michael Ende's book, and you have a decent film adaptation that's become beloved. And you have two sequels that have not been, and possibly remakes, which is a whole other discussion, but is appropriate to the point I'm making. You have Ende, and he puts this idea onto the page, and you have an adaptation which decently does so, memorably does so, in the 1980s. And then you have two attempts to revive that or recapture it, and they both fail. Is that agreed or disagreed?
Very agreed.
Okay, very agree with an adjective, no less, as good as varieties. Very agreed, she says. So you have that, and the characters, nominally are continuing on in life. Bastian's now in high school, and you can't recapture it. And then there is this flip side. So you have this whole magical world that Andy's coming at, and we have in the imagination, and it speaks to us so deeply to some of the themes in our first two chats. I mean, these are the Gamork and the child princess, who is actually ancient in the story, incidentally. And then and so all that magic becomes becomes channeled into pop culture through publishing and through the movie. Ende's magic and what he was able to grasp, the realities of childhood and life and adulthood on the opposite end that he was able to grasp, are funneled into pop culture at a certain point in the 1980s. And then this is very meta, and then they're spit out in these in the second and third installments and possibly remakes and whatever, which will likely be just as unimpressive. They're spit out into pop culture, and they can never really recapture it. And I mentioned history classes this week. You can see this in history. I think there's something very similar happening. So I've just laid out an artistic observation, I think. And you see this in history, and whether it's the Americans in the 1800 or the 18th century trying to recapture ancient Rome in the American Revolution, and kind of doing that, but not really. I mean, there's something very, very different about America from ancient Rome, and yet people before the American Revolution were in togas. And there are examples with the Irish before 1916, with the Germans during the Second World War and the whole Nazi experiment trying to recapture Germanish. ISIS in our time trying to, in a very ham-fisted way. There's something, and this is my point, and maybe I've made a mess of this, or maybe I'm onto something. And they captured something about childhood that was never able subsequently to be reproduced. And historically, different groups and different movements have observed and palpitated something about their, something about reality, whether it was the Americans and the whole idea of Rome and liberty and all of that, or the Irish or the Germans and or the Muslims in the ISIS nonsense. There is something historically very interesting about this, where you have a reality, but when you try to recapture it, you can never do it. You end up with a modern Ireland or a Nazi party, which is a cartoon of, German culture, or the MAGA movement with Trump, a cartoon of a cartoon, trying to replicate an America through advertisements from the 1940s, or ISIS trying, God knows what's going through their CIA brains. But there is a reality here, and this is my final point, that, and I guess this is the takeaway for me from these past 3 weeks is, life happens in the moment. Childhood for a stage in life happens in the moment, and it can't quite ever really be reproduced. And it can be cherished for what it was in the past, but when you try to reproduce it, and when you try to prolong the time, it's never, you end up with a fetal alcohol syndrome puppet, for Falkor. And I don't know if I made a mess of my final conclusion or not, Lindsey, but that's anyway, kind of my penultimate thought here.
Well, I would agree with you, and I would say, with this book specifically too, it kind of shows us the way through all of that. So when we're trying to emulate something and reproduce it for other people's benefits or externalize it, especially when we don't yet understand it ourselves, we only end up doing damage, or we only end up degrading the thing that is true, right? And that's what these movies are doing, and that's what all these people are doing. And that's actually the story of Bastian in the book. That's the true process he's going through, is realizing, it doesn't actually matter what these other people see me as, or whether or not they see me, or whether or not, I'm brave in their eyes. It matters like what I hold within me and what I understand myself as, and whether or not I know myself. And if not, that I'm honest about it and that I go about finding out. And so it's always this internal thing that matters. And I would say in the creation of these things, you could actually do it. You could create a good never-ending story, but only under one condition. And I think that this is why Michael Ende was able to produce such a stunningly powerful initiation into self and the mysteries through this book, is because he had done it himself. He's lived this already. He has internalized the truths, right? What Jung would say, he like individuated. And so he's able to then share at least a really good simulacrum of that process and what it looks like at least a really good reflection of it. But the people who are then creating these, they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't even understand why the book is so good, and I'll say this is true probably for a good number of people who read the book. So that was really good, but I don't necessarily know why. I don't really know exactly what it's about, but I really liked it, right? There's something that rings true about it. I resonate with that, but maybe they're not going into the full analysis or the full, inner look at themselves and this reality when doing it. But at least you can give this sort of flavor, and at least it can kind of ripple out through people's minds. And but if you have no inner understanding, if you have no sort of self-reflection, if you have no idea about that, then you're just trying to create this externalized thing and be like, look, everyone, see what I did. And that's the least valuable thing you can do.
Mm.
right? The most valuable thing you can do is grow internally, and the least valuable thing you can do is try to get other people to do anything, actually see you a certain way, like do, react or do something themselves. Like that's just like the least meaningful thing. So in all of those aspects of history too, I feel like there's these people who are not actualized, right? They're not individuated, and they're like, let's do this. This is what I really want. This would be great. And then it's a cool vision, but it's like all this stuff that's outside external and isn't actually the point. And people who are into power and politics and stuff, that I don't even think they know what I just said. I
Mm.
don't even know if they know what I mean, right? That actually, like, the truest power and the deepest aspect of power you could produce in this reality is within you.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of meditation, including your one just now, from the afterlife, let's say, of the Neverending Story, in terms of exactly what Ende was trying to point out about the world of the child, or the innocent world, or something of the child, I think, can be carried on into adulthood, in fact.
Mhm.
But versus the world, the dunya, or the samsara, or whatever the different religions call this so-called reality. But Lindsey, we can prime the pump for the next 2 years. It takes a while for us to get our schedules
Yeah.
in sync here, but I was horrified, as you were giving a great explanation there, to see that there actually already have been
Ah,
continuations. So these are tales from the Neverending Story.
which, if it's sort of like, I don't know if you remember The Matrix. What was it called? The
Mhm.
Matrix?
Reloaded,
Animatrix? The
Animatrix.
Animatrix,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they had
yeah.
all these different takes, but it was like very, I think, true to the world. And
Mm.
so if you have stuff like that, it can be great, right? Fan
Mhm.
art and fan fiction can be amazing, because the people who deeply love something can actually produce these really beautiful sort of continuations or spin-offs. But if you're just doing it again in this way, where you're like, hey, maybe we can make more money off this,
Mm.
what did people like about it, what what can we pile into it, like, then it's going to be garbage.
Well, something else too, not we maybe down the road we'll revisit this whole series, because apparently they're going to make a remake. Well, we'll find out. Apparently there's nothing you can't remake in America in the past 20 years, so why not?
Right. Right.
Uh, but it's interesting with I just in my historical meditations, one of the things you'll notice too is that different groups, before they're conquered, will often produce unbelievable resistance, whether that's the Gauls fighting the Romans, or the American Indians fighting the US Army, or the Germans fighting modernity in the Second World War, arguably. Whatever the case may be, you'll often see groups, and I'm trying to make a point here artistically, that will put out their greatest expensive energy, an outlay of energy, before their collapse. And what happens afterwards is that these groups become actually 10 times worse, and well, I won't say worse, 10 times more of their conqueror than their conqueror is. So, for instance, Lindsay, in the Second World War, the Japanese fought these United States. Right now, the Japanese are the best Western classical musicians and best dressers on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
They became 10 times more Western than the Westerners are.
Yeah.
The American Indians are the last people, having been conquered by the cowboys. The American Indians are the very last people dressed unironically as cowboys.
Yeah.
I'm told if you go to Baghdad right now, all the men are tatted up and running around on motorcycles listening to rock music in Arabic.
Yep.
They are 10 times more American than the Americans are.
Yeah.
And moving towards the art, and this is my very final point before we hear about your rogue soul, I'll let you get on with your day. Towards art, one of the things you notice prior to the First World War is that poetry reaches almost a peak of mania, of perfection. And recently, there are many sensible things on Substack. Recently, there was a sensible article on Substack about this very point, that you had Tennyson, the British poet Tennyson, and he was only one generation removed from William Carlos Williams. You had Tennyson and his Charge of the Light Brigade, and the apotheosis of ballad poetry, and this very, very restrained discipline type of poetry. And he's only one generation separated by the First World War between the American Williams poet, who had big, I mean, literally like Cat in the Hat poetry for the early modernists. And what the hell does any of this have to do with the Neverending Story? One of the things that's striking me in our conversations here is that this amazing meditation on imagination and reading happens in we'll say 1979. The book's published. The movie comes out in the early 80s. Between the original Neverending Story, which we all remember in the book, and the tales of whatever the tales of the Neverending Story is, and number 3 and all this, reading has completely stopped. We all, the West at least, has become completely visual. So those I need to think a bit more about this, but this struck me, especially in this last show here, Lindsey, is that this aspect of reaching the apotheosis before the collapse here, which plugs right into a lot of mythology. We can do many other shows on, but Ragnarok,
Right.
whatever.
Right. It's actually so sad. This was the sort of central moment in the very beginning of the Neverending Story, the first one, where you get sort of drawn into the character of Bastian. I mean, somewhat when he's running away from bullies, we can all maybe relate to that. But then when he's talking about like, no, I've been at the bottom of the ocean and I've done, and if you have read at all at that point of your life, you're like, oh, me too. I get it. Right. I get absorbed into this, and your imagination is so wild, and you're just like loving this experience. And would kids today even have any idea what they're talking about when he's talking with Carl Conrad Coriander and Bastian Balthazar about the depth that reading can take you to? And I don't know if they do. I don't know if they can.
I heard someone, as you tell us a bit about Rogue Souls and what you have coming up here, Lindsey, I heard someone lately mention that, and I say lately, in the past few years, and even a few years ago, I didn't understand what he meant. He had said that little girls now, we call them tweens with a W, would have a very hard time in 20 and 25 understanding the world of Alice in Wonderland, and that when Lewis Carroll wrote that book in the 19th century, that something was different. I mean, there was something about life that people could imagine, and that book could eventually take off. And that such a story now, if it even got any sort of traction in terms of pop reception, would be forgotten in a minute. Like all sorts of so-called historical things in our life, the fall of Afghanistan, Charlie Kirk, things which would have been 50 years ago memorable to the end of our lives, have been completely forgotten weeks later.
Yeah, this is the digitization, and digitization meaning literally disconnection and separation, and right, like the tiny fracturization of everything, and whereas analog is the connection, the interconnection between everything, and we're in an analog universe actually, but when we go further and further into this digitalization of everything, we also become disconnected from each other, we become disconnected from the past, we become disconnected from even a few weeks ago, we become disconnected from ourselves. There's actually nothing, I think, more dangerous than this, and it's a perfectly good tool if we, can retain our analog understanding of self and reality and nourish it, which is the opposite of what our culture is doing. We're definitely promoting the TikTokization of all kids, right? You're like, pay attention for 20 seconds and then stop and then forget. And then pay attention for 20 seconds and then stop and then forget. And it was already bad enough with education, where we're like, pay attention for 40 minutes and then stop and then forget. And then pay attention for 40 minutes and then stop and then forget. And now it's, down to the seconds. And so it's a pretty dangerous time. But I feel like, as with all things, we come up against these biggest of challenges, and then by overcoming them, we sort of transmute them forever. And ideally, that's what we're doing here, is we're going to recognize just how important it is to get analog and to get real and to get connected and to read books and to write by hand and, to maybe even sew or cook or, do all these things that are analog and continuous and connect us to the past and create the future. And speaking of like that's also what the Neverending Story is all about. So
Excellent.
but you can find me at roguesoul.org. This is where all of the things I do are. My books are here. There are some of the sort of channeled source inspirational spiritual books. And then there's also the fictional trilogy, which again, if you're a reader, if you're an analog lover, you may enjoy those books. They're pretty fun. I myself love them and reread them. I didn't have the money to pay for an editor, so there's some misspellings and some things. And you may have had this experience with your own writing too. I think I have edited all of those books like 15 times, but there's still stuff that's just in there. And so it's so funny. They're very much, that kind of a text. You're not going to, until someone finds me and they want to promote it and they want to, pay for that $5,000 editor, they're going to have some of those, which I kind of find endearing about them, right? But those texts are all there on the site.
Wait, you were very polite there, Lindsey. Hold that thought.
Yes.
Okay, you're very polite there. So are you talking about what I have to deal with? People giving suggestions about how your work sucks, but not actually forking over money. They'll give you actually like you should do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
But yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got that recently with something. Yeah.
They're like, you should really get an editor. I'm like, hey man, if you want to give me $5,000 for one, I will absolutely do it. Come on, do it. I want you to. So yeah, I mean, they're still very polished, very finished, very good, but it's just, another book you might have picked up from Barnes and Noble, you may not ever have a single error because somebody was paid to go moment by moment, line by line, but that's quite expensive. So anyway, not to go into the the details of all of that, but that's all there. I also have in the shop my orgone that I create. I have the classes that I teach. And then you can also schedule with me one-on-one sessions there in the scheduling section. I've got lots of different opportunities for one-on-one spiritual work. And so that's all there as well. So that is the site. That's where you can find me. I also have my Substack. It's rogueways.substack.com. And this is where I do my writing. And so a lot of my, treatises on various topics and my, philosophical, spiritual, historical, I do a lot of sort of book summaries or selections of quotations from books I've just finished reading and just some different things there. And so that Substack is a fun place to be too if you're into Substack.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Lindsey. And I will put this down below. And can they find Substack from this website, or would you have me put that as well?
This links to everywhere you can listen and watch and see the show that I do, Rogue Soul. You can also then link to my Substack. All my socials are here. This piece from a documentary that I was in called Every Soul Knows is here. And so that's my recounting of some of my most profound spiritual experiences. You can even listen to the show on this very page. So that's there too.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So that will be down below. And then when you have sufficiently gorged on Lindsey's stuff, you can come to what one darling on Reddit called a bloated, oversized website called ApocatastasisInstitute.wordpress. I was one to offer him, editing job. He is still yet to produce himself.
There you go.
But for those of you who do like literature, like the Neverending Story, we do have these open events. These are great ways to get in touch with the school community in general, regardless of any further commitment. Be part of our learning journey. We, back in October, had a horror movie series of these open events. Then we just yesterday, the day before, concluded a series on when do we begin the medieval period, and we had some texts like the Quran or the Song of Roland we looked at, and we're beginning for our last stretch this semester a series entitled The Battle of the Books. We're going to double up each week on 2 different texts. Next week, as of this recording, we're going to look at June and The Hobbit, and we're going to go from there, comparing 2 thematically similar but different takes on a topic. And it would be grand for you to join us. It's a great way to help the college out. And it's a great way to, if you're interested in enrolling in a proper course, to get a feel for things. All right. So with that, we're going to let Lindsey get on with her very busy day here. And to the audience, do your due diligence and support herself and get to reading The Neverending Story.
Awesome. Thank you, John, for having me.